and developing emotional literacy. I'm just going to give folks just another minute or two to hop on. And then as soon as I see that it doesn't look like anyone else is joining for a minute, we'll go ahead and get started. But happy to have you all here. Hope you're enjoying your Thursday so far. I think I'm just going to keep it rolling. I don't see anyone else in the waiting room. So we'll get started. Thank you all again for being here. We are talking about feelings and talking about the pyramid model, and really focusing on how to do this in everyday interactions, so that it's just something that becomes part of your day. We want to acknowledge that we are doing this webinar and the corresponding pyramid model efforts through our partnership with the Office of Early Childhood and in collaboration with the Pyramid Model Partnership, the Connecticut Pyramid Model Partnership, which is the state leadership team. And so we are grateful to both the OEC and to the Pyramid Model Partnership for their collaboration and partnership in our pyramid model efforts throughout the state. As we get started, I see a number of familiar names in our list over here, but so thank you all for those of you who are coming back to join us for another Pyramid Model Practices webinar. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, it's so great to see you. My name is Rachel Vanatta. I'm joined by my colleagues at the UConn School of Social Work's Innovations Institute, Kate Sweeney, Liz Chambers, and Liz Hoy. And we, in partnership with a number of other evaluation folks on our team, support pyramid model efforts throughout the state. So again, thank you for those of you who come consistently, and this is not your first time. It's great to see you. And for anyone who's new, we're really happy that you are here with us today. And we would love to hear a little bit more about you. And so in the chat, if you'll sign in with your name and the age of the children you work with, and then if you can respond to either or both of these two questions. What emotion in children shows up most often in your setting or in your interactions with children? And what emotions do you feel like they need the most help with identifying and labeling? So we'll give folks a minute to go ahead and sign in and let us know a little bit more about you and who you work with. Melissa, thank you so much for getting us started. Ages 3 to 5, angry, sad, and energetic. I love, Melissa, I really appreciate thinking about energetic. I think that that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. I think we often talk about sort of quote unquote negative emotions, but having a lot of energy and sort of managing that, naming that and managing that is really important for children as well. Justine just recently switched from K to 5 to 3s. Welcome. Melanie, family outreach specialist at a 6-week to 6-year-old program. Wonderful. Miriam, 0 to 5, Head Start and Early Head Start, mad and sad. Yeah, absolutely. Martha, age 3 to 5, sad and angry. Lena, 0 to 21, behavioral issues. Yep. Sherry, anger, disappointment, and sadness. Yeah, I see a lot of sad and mad or some iteration of sad and mad, but also that disappointment, right? That's one that we have to get sort of used to figuring out. It's one that we experience with a good bit of frequency throughout our lives. Benita, 0 to 5. Vanessa, um, the ones you see the most, I think you're saying, are mad and happy and need help labeling sadness. Yeah. Lori, frustration. Absolutely. Um, Lots of happy, frustration, confused. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Anger. Yeah. So again, it looks like sort of a lot of themes of like anger and sadness, but also some of these, again, kind of how we would typically label as more positive emotions, happy and excited or energetic, like finding a way to name those things too. Absolutely. Maria, sad and angry. Okay, sadness, frustration. Yeah, so I guess if there's one thing that we've maybe learned so far already in these first eight minutes is that you're not alone. It seems like there's definitely a lot of overlap in what you're seeing and overlap in what would be helpful in supporting children with kind of learning how to name and label. So thank you all so much for doing that and sort of letting us know what it is that you're seeing. So today we're really focusing on emotional literacy as a foundational social emotional skill, and that it really supports children in recognizing, understanding, expressing, and managing their feelings. So I think a lot of times, when we're seeing when we see dysregulated behavior, there's sort of conversation about like managing a feeling. But before we can manage a feeling, we have to first be able to label it. So there's a bit of a sort of developmental progression in these skills. And we know that when adults intentionally support emotional literacy, children develop a number of other skills, right? They develop stronger relationships, they develop their self regulation skills, and they develop confidence in being able to navigate things that are disappointing or that are when their feelings get hurt because someone said they didn't want to play with them that day. They become more confident that they can sort of tolerate those things. And so, again, today we're really going to talk about pyramid model practices that promote emotional literacy. And this could be at home. And so, again, if we have anyone here who might use these skills in the home or in an early care and education setting, and also could be talked about if you work in an early care and education setting, things that you could talk with your families about, such that they can also support their children at home. So we're hoping to really talk about some practical and relationship-based strategies that will help children first identify their emotions and really build a feeling vocabulary, and then start to express their emotions in healthy ways. Again, thinking through our everyday interactions, routines, conversations, play. So things that are happening all the time, not sort of like considering this as an extra or additional thing, but really looking at ways that this can be woven throughout your day. So we're hopeful by the end of our hour together that you as participants will be able to explain why emotional literacy is a critical foundation for children's success, for their social, emotional, and behavioral success, that you'll be able to identify some strategies that you can use to strengthen children's emotional vocabulary, that you'll have ideas about being able to model and coach children in recognizing and expressing their emotions during those everyday routines or play or social interactions. Again, the things that are just sort of happening all the time. That you'll also have ideas about how you can use books or visual supports, and just the teachable moments that happen throughout the day to promote emotional literacy across settings. And then you'll have some thoughts about having a plan for partnering with families and primary caregivers to support consistent emotional literacy practices across settings, right? Such that they're being used at home and in their care settings throughout the day. And so really our lens that we're coming, I think if we could, have you sort of put on these glasses or put on this lens, this idea that emotions are present for us from the very beginning, right? That this is not something that takes time to develop. We have emotions from the very beginning. Um, but identifying them, labeling them, practicing ways to manage them and sort of work through them or resolve them has to be taught. And you probably can think about, you might know several adults in your life who really struggle with identifying and managing their emotions. This is not something that we just sort of automatically become capable of doing. We really do need some support, and again, really thinking about in a relationship based way from people who we care about to develop these skills. So I'm going to pass it over to Kate now to talk a little bit more about the pyramid model and alignment.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for setting us up. So, as we've acknowledged previously, some of you are coming to these webinars because you know Pyramid well and want some additional, focused supports around a given strategy or practice. And some of you are coming to these as a way of learning about Pyramid model. So, I'm going to spend the next couple of slides just orienting you to the model and how this task or focus of emotional literacy fits into that. So the visual that you see here is from NCPMI, which is the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations, and illustrates a pyramid, as may be indicated by the name, which is replicated in any public health approach, but applied in this setting, in this context, really to support social emotional confidence in infants and young children, focusing first on the effective workforce. That all of these strategies are really the portal in is, often managing social emotional needs or challenges in behavior that come up in young kids. But all of that is really done through the work of adults, whether they be family home providers, classroom educators, or families in their own homes and routines with kids. And then it follows by tiers. So rather than thinking first of the quote unquote challenging child or bad kid, at the top that needs intensive targeted interventions, really thinking first with the lens of equity and cultural responsivity around the environments and relationships within that context. Then thinking about targeted social emotional supports in tier two or the green before applying strategies that would look at the individualized needs of a child around this work, knowing that when we settle the water first, a lot of those intensive needs are soothed or supported by those practices first. Within pyramid model, there are several key principles to this work. The first is a foundation of inclusivity, cultural responsivity, anti-racist and anti-bias practices. That the pyramid model is really an intentional undoing of a lot of that work that exists within education, all the way down to infant and toddler classrooms. It holds the fact that social and emotional development is foundational for other developmental domains. And you'll see here that the concept of emotional literacy really fits directly into that. This idea that the same way that for any other developmental domain you would teach and practice something, we have to do that for children with emotions. So they need to be taught how to identify them and release them and all of the ways to do that. And so that's what we'll focus on for the next bit of time. A couple more pyramid model principles before we get to that is that behavior is communication, right? So it's communicating a need, and often it's our responsibility not to respond to how that behavior is expressed, but what that need is. And so a lot of the pyramid work is really undoing adults' maybe initial reactions to behavior in the moment and offering a different opportunity or response. And as I've already said, it's really all that work is really focused on adults. And the good news is that it's much easier for us to change our own behavior than someone else's. So we talked about the tiers quickly, and all of our focus today around emotional literacy is really within the sort of tier two of targeted social emotional supports. This idea of how do we have intentional teaching and practice of social emotional skills, and identifying emotions being primary. And then the other sort of activities within tier two are after emotional literacy is self-regulation, right? Friendship skills and problem solving skills. So how do we not only identify our feeling when we're having them or feeling in a peer, but use that within our day to navigate all these things. Um, and all of these things are really things that we expect kids to do when they show up in group settings, but that we have to developmentally scaffold and support them to learn and practice and integrate within their way of being. So the connection of all of this to pyramid model, that emotional literacy or the ability to identify and navigate and label emotions, really supports all of the things that you see here on this list. So in order to have positive relationships, I need to understand how I'm feeling about our interaction and maybe how the consequence of how you're feeling as well, as we're sort of playing together or navigating this task in front of us. I need to be able to regulate my emotions and identifying them is key first, right? Um, Problem solving comes up a lot in this, the idea of, again, peer or friendship skills, as well as interactions and relationships with adults, right? This idea of being able to identify your emotions and navigate them comes into play whenever you're interacting with another person. And then, of course, to prevent challenging behavior so that it's not ignored until it's bubbled over. But how do I begin to understand that I'm feeling frustrated by the task in front of me, and so I need to be able to label that, to accept that, to sort of release that. And again, all in favor of practicing these skills, as Rachel was saying, within the regular routines or activities throughout your day with children, so that they're not first asked to defend or label or explain an emotion when they're upset or in trouble, but that it becomes just part of that work of understanding their task in front of them. So we've used the term a couple of times already, but wanting to just really define emotional literacy for you, as it is documented within all of the pyramid model literature. It's the ability to recognize feelings, to label feelings, to understand feelings in yourself and others, and to express feelings appropriately. When we say appropriately, there can be many implications to that word, but really it's the idea that like of within the given setting or scene that you're in, so that there can be times where you're at home and it's okay to, have a pillow that you hit or throw, but what is the sort of acceptable or appropriate way to express that same feeling when you're in a different setting, right? So when you have that same feeling in the grocery store in a cart, when your parent is trying to get dinner before you all go home, or within your group classroom or group care setting. So a child sort of onboarding as they mature developmentally between birth and age 5 or 6 to kind of navigate all of that. Are big tasks, and we often if all of those things aren't taught and practiced, what happens is a child will express it in a way that we see as inappropriate. And then instead of being supported to do all those things that need to come first, to recognize, to label, to understand, and to express it appropriately, they're just in trouble for their reaction to the feeling. Um, so that's why it matters. And you can see we've sort of talked about this a lot, but that the more that this can be done in sort of micro moments where there's a little bit of frustration and they're coached or taught to navigate conflict either between themselves and a peer at a given art table within the classroom, or between themselves and a task, like if they're getting frustrated with getting the paper to stick where they want it to complete their bird art piece or whatever it might be. How are they coached to kind of recognize, you're feeling upset in your body, I can see that you feel tense. Would it be helpful to take 2 deep breaths and then to try again before you get upset and rip up the paper? So the idea of sort of coaching them through those small moments. Additionally, we actually ask kids to be able to navigate and communicate their needs to adults independently at very young ages, especially when they're in group educational and care settings. And so, in order to do that, they need to be able to go through all those initial steps of recognizing that they're feeling frustrated or sad or left out or upset, and then going and asking appropriately for help rather than, again, having it spill over in a behavior that seems to be not appropriate for the space or not tolerated at that time. Because the list in front of you that you see here of meltdowns, aggression, withdrawal, or difficulty solving problems, and ultimately difficulty with relationships with peers and with adults is what happens when kids are not supported to describe how they feel and resolve it in an okay way. And so you can see the balance of all this work being done before it gets too big, so that it feels sort of more realistic for them to unpack and work through with you before their lid gets totally flipped, so that they can have the ability to do that and interact with peers. And I think this is when I hand it over to Liz.
Okay, so the key message here is for the adults that behavior is communication, and kids are able to better communicate their needs when they have the language and the experience to understand what their needs are. Um, let me go to the next slide. So the premise that is that behavior communicates a skill in children that needs development or support. Often we think, they're just doing it because they're frustrated or they're mad or they're sad. Um, but often there's a skill that is underdeveloped. So, and one of the best ways I can think to describe this premise is um, the phrase that we hear all the time, use your words. We tell kids that are crying or that are hurt or whatever to use their words, but what if they don't have a word to describe how they're feeling? So we have to teach them words and how to identify the ways that they're feeling in their bodies when they're having certain emotions. And as they have more exposure to that and practice that, they're able to more accurately label their feelings and have different ways to express them in ways that we find acceptable. So we see a lot less expression of the more challenging behaviors when children have the skills that they need to be able to describe and regulate their emotions. A very important key takeaway is that all of this should happen in times where children are not upset or in trouble. When a child is mid meltdown, trying to tell them, notice the feeling in your body and tell me how you're feeling is really very rarely going to work because their brains are not able to work in that way in those moments. Instead, we have to use the time that we have where children are engaged to intentionally teach these skills and intentionally help children identify how they're feeling and ways to release and regulate their emotions that are ways that we, as the adults, find acceptable in each setting. A child really, unless they have been taught it, they don't know how to behave in a grocery store. So the more we can use these learning opportunities to help them practice these skills, the better each situation is going to go. Um, so now that we talked about kind of the what and the why, we're going to talk about how. So I think it's a common misconception that kids just know emotion words and if they know how to throw a tantrum, they know how to calm down, right? But that's just not true. And as the adults in their lives, we have to use every opportunity we have to um, teach emotional literacy in ways that are just a part of our day. It's not a particular lesson or an activity that we plan. The most important ways that kids learn these skills is through their everyday interactions with other people. So strategies we're going to talk about today are just incorporating emotional literacy into your everyday routines, how we can use books to support emotional literacy, pretty much any book. Um, Play, how can we use play, our everyday play interactions, and then using visual supports. And there are many ways to do that. So there are so many opportunities throughout the day to practice emotional literacy within our routines. If you think about every day you wake up, your morning routine is an opportunity to express some sort of emotion. Sometimes I am frustrated by the way I woke up, or I wake up really, really hungry, and it makes me feel a certain way. And so when we are able to recognize the emotions and the ways that our children show up in our routines and kind of be that um, narrator for them and use intentional language throughout these routines, the children hear the words more frequently and they're used in meaningful situations, so their vocabulary grows a little bit stronger. Um, it's more meaningful for me to hear every day during mealtime some emotion words and some ways that I can regulate my body than it is for us to sit down at a table with some blocks and talk about it. Um, in early education settings, some of the routines that we see many opportunities to incorporate emotional vocabulary. So during arrival time, if you think about like separation anxiety, there's many opportunities to name what children are feeling during those moments of the day. Circle time can be a great time to talk about everyone's feelings. So you can not only notice how you're feeling, but you can notice others because there's a group there. Center time, we can help children work through conflicts by noticing the way that they're feeling. I know that anger and mad showed up a lot in the chat. And I think that a great way during playtime to support emotional literacy is to help children notice when they're having a conflict with someone else, notice how their body feels, and give them words to describe it and solutions that they can work towards to feel better. So there are so many opportunities throughout the day, not only at home, but during group care time, where we can support children in naming and noticing their feelings. Oops, sorry, I disappeared for a second. Um, so one of the most important things that adults can do for children to support their emotional literacy is to just become a narrator. Everything that they do, everything you notice about their face, their bodies, instead of asking children how they feel all the time, you can just say how you notice what you notice. So, instead of saying, "Oh, you're so mad," you can say, "You look disappointed that playtime is over." So you're giving them a word that is more meaningful than mad. They're disappointed is the true emotion, and linking it to what happened. And another example is you're so proud of your drawing. So they feel proud. They don't really know what that word is yet. We have to teach them the word. We have to link it to what they're feeling. Um, and we should avoid telling them how they should feel. Um, Everyone feels different about every situation. So, and every emotion is okay. Instead, we want to help them identify their emotion and understand it, and then also have acceptable way to express it. Our goal here is really to build the vocabulary that they have and the awareness of their body so that they can better understand how they're feeling in those moments. As you talk about feelings, we really want to move away from, or not move away from, but move beyond the basic emotions of happy, mad, and sad. There are so many other ways to describe how kids are feeling, and a lot of the time it might look like mad to those who are the audience, but it could be frustration, it could be worry, it could be scared. So when they have more of the language to put behind the feeling, they're better able to understand what they're feeling and have a way to express it. So some of the other words we are suggesting are proud, disappointed. I think frustrated is a really important word for young children. Um, a lot of the time when mad happens, or when we think mad happens, it's frustration. So if they're able to understand that they're really not mad at their friend, they're frustrated that they don't have the same toy, it's a lot easier to solve that problem by, having the language to describe what I'm feeling, and then they can ask for help for us with a solution. I think another important piece to that is that we want to ensure that we're using positive emotion words just as much as the negative emotion words, in quotes. So, giving kids words to describe when they're feeling happy or they're feeling peaceful or calm, or they're feeling loved or they're feeling excited. Those are also really important emotions to recognize and understand in themselves. Um, Books are one of the most accessible ways to help children learn emotion words and connect it to real life situations that they might see. Um, it's sometimes easier to talk about a character's feelings than it is to talk about their own. Instead of saying, well, why are you upset? You can read a book about upset and ask, why does the character feel that way? How do we know that the character feels that way? So they can start to notice things in the book characters that also happen in them, like maybe their cheeks are red or their fists are balled up. And then we can connect it back to the children. And have you ever felt that way? Um, Stories work well because there are a lot of vocabulary words in them. They give children access to language that is often not spoken in normal conversation. It feels a little bit safer because they're characters instead of exploring heavy topics like fear or anger or sadness with the children and about themselves. They can process it through looking at a character. And then perspective shifting, reading stories about diverse characters and diverse stories naturally strengthens children's empathy and an understanding of others, which helps build their emotional vocabulary and ability to understand the emotions in themselves and others. This is just if you receive our monthly newsletter, the Pyramid Model newsletter, there's always a list of books that can be used to support the strategies that are pyramid model strategies. Um, so we hope that you have access to that, and we can put the link in the chat to sign up for the newsletter. Because it is a great way. It's an easy place to find books that will support each of these or each newsletter's topic.
Yeah, and shout out to Liz Hoy on our team who's on today for pulling this list that you see here. So our focus in the newsletter this month was also the same topic. So while this is a standing section within the newsletter, we expanded it a bit, and she sort of carefully curated here both books that focus on a given topic. So like Roaring Mad Riley, Jabari Jumps. So those are books that like throughout a narrative, you're following a character that has that feeling and it explores the different ways that it shows up and the different ways that it's resolved or supported. And then there's a couple of other books that you see as well. Happy, Sad Today, What If Feelings, or How Do I Feel that go over practicing just the labeling and range of emotions. So it's good to have both at your fingertips.
Thank you. One of the other great ways to help support emotional literacy is by using visuals. So we see these a lot in classrooms, feelings, faces, or charts with different emotions displayed. Um, One that I really, really love is having mirrors in your classroom or at home for young children to just explore. They get to look at themselves and make faces and see how their face changes when they make different faces. And it's really helps them explore their emotions. Um, Family photos are a good way to talk about feelings, especially when they are posted in the classroom and they become a part of the classroom. We can refer to them, when children are sad or when they're feeling very happy or they're feeling loved. They're, showing love to each other. We can relate that to how they feel with their families. Um, Visuals support all children, and especially dual language learners. If we're able to connect a word with a visual, it's helpful. Children with developmental differences might not have the spoken language um, to convey what they need to convey. So having visuals to support that language. Language doesn't have to be spoken. So when there are different ways to communicate, it helps children with their uptake of whatever we're trying to teach them. Um, Children have emotions and understand emotions long before they have the words to describe them. So visuals can help us decipher before they're able to tell us. Um, Teaching through play is something we probably don't think about very often when we're playing with children, but play is their natural language. So when they engage in pretend play, they're also practicing their emotional literacy. Their puppets can be scared or their dinosaurs can feel disappointed. Stuffed animals can help them learn to calm down. Um, Role play can allows children to practice emotional situations in a safe place before they actually happen. And I think that that is a really important way to teach some of these skills in role-playing situation because you can make any situation up as you're playing and work through it and it can be fun and it doesn't feel scary because it's not real. And they can often have a safe place to experiment with different emotions and solutions to those emotions. Um, Emotional literacy also is not just naming the emotions, it's also supporting the skills to express, tolerate, and resolve emotions. Um, so every feeling doesn't need to disappear immediately. We need to have the skills to feel the feeling, recognize the feeling, name the feeling, and then understand what's needed to express it in a acceptable way for the situation they're in. Um, so I think that it's really important to move beyond just the, oh, you look sad, but also what can we do when you feel this way and have some resources and strategies that are practiced along the way. So some of the ways that we can coach children through their feelings is just acknowledging that you're noticing what they're feeling. I can see that you're upset, or I can see that your shoulders dropped and your fist balled up and you started crying. You can see that. Um, and it's okay to feel disappointed, or it's okay to feel frustrated. This is what we can do now. Um, so moving beyond the just stopping the emotion that is either challenging to us or disruptive to our day, to really, really being there for the child and acknowledging how they're feeling, because it's okay to feel that way. Um, and then moving beyond the acknowledgement to how can we best support this feeling in this moment, in this situation. Um, and I like on the slide it says let's figure out. So, you're not just telling them what to do. We're working it out together. And it really, really helps build that safety as you're working through emotions with children. It makes them feel safe. And they'll be more willing to come to you when they're feeling something that they're not sure what to do with. And it really, really helps them in the problem solving arena when they feel safe enough to have to be able to express their emotions. These are just some more resources for supporting emotional literacy. So the first one is an NCPMI handout that is just about teaching emotions. And then there are a whole series of backpack um, connections that are designed for caregivers in programs to use as a support for families to understand what's happening in your program. And there is one about labeling emotions, and we can put those links in the chat as well. So our final takeaway today is that children and adults do best when all emotions are allowed, they're talked about, they're supported, they're discussed, they're given names, and they're given um, strategies to support changing the emotion if needed. These are skills that need to be that need to be taught and practiced. And I think that the biggest takeaway from this slide is that we have to do it as the adults. We have to do it as well. So if we start with noticing our own emotions and naming our own emotions and naming and narrating how we're doing in the day, it becomes easier to do it with the children. They see that it's not just when I'm sad, my teacher tells me I look sad. It's happening all the time, and we're all thinking about emotions and we're all talking about emotions, and we have the language that we need to talk about it. And then we do have some time today for a little reflection. If you want to put it in the chat, what is one emotional literacy strategy that you could use soon, as soon as this week? And I can start because brought something up for me. Um, I feel like I'm an emotionally literate person, and I have had a couple experiences lately where I cannot name the feeling that I'm feeling. I just, it doesn't, um, I don't know. I don't have a word for it. So I think that, um, I think that reading, I'm going to read some books that describe emotions. And I'm going to try to figure out exactly what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like my kids are all old and they're leaving me. That's what I'm actually feeling. But there's no emotion word for it. So I'm going to try to find an emotion word for myself. Melissa said she's going to do puppet role playing. I think that is so effective with young children. It's safe. They don't feel, like you're talking about them. You can make up any situation with a puppet. Um, Justine likes how you give them the feeling that you're seeing so they can have the vocabulary and they can start connecting the two on their own. Yeah, it feels funny at first to start narrating what other people are doing. But once you start doing it and you see the children will start doing it, they'll start noticing emotions in themselves and others the more they hear it. Um, it really does become part of your day. Putting home pictures up in the classroom next to a mirror and have children make the faces and name the feeling. I love that idea. It's fun and they can connect to the emotions of the looks on their own faces with the emotions of others. Important to support the feeling and work with it. Yeah, all emotions are okay. They're all acceptable. We have them because we're humans. We just have to know what to do with them. Martha said reading books about emotions. Yes, there's so many books out there, and we can usually take any children's book and find an emotion in it. There's usually some sort of challenge or problem that they have to resolve, and we can always find some way to connect it to their emotions. Well, thank you all for giving us your um, thoughts, play games where they can identify different emotion. Yeah, there's so many opportunities to just embed it throughout your day, and not think of it as like an extra lesson to teach. I think that's my favorite part of all of this is that it can just happen at any time throughout the day. It's not a specific art activity or block center activity. It's just all day, every day. Um, this is our next pyramid practice, lunch and learn. Will be July 23rd from 12 to 1. And we'll be talking about social skills, developing social skills through play because it's going to be midsummer. And then there's also a link to the previous lunch and learn playlist recordings.
Can you guys share the links for us on the chat? We can copy. I love to do that, you know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Here's the playlist, previous lunch and learns.
And I think you have another links, the one before you finish the explanation. you showed two links over there. I don't remember where in
Here's in the chat,
that
there's
that one. Can you share these two?
yep, just put them in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think those were the only links. Oh, maybe the newsletter sign up. All right, well, thank you all for joining us.